I want to tell you about a single number written in pencil on a hospital intake form in a county building in West Virginia in the winter of 1931. It was written by a nurse. Her hand was steady. She had taken thousands of measurements before that night, and she would take thousands after. This one she took twice, because she did not believe it the first time. Then she wrote it down, and then a few hours later she was told to erase it. She did. She lived another 48 years carrying that erased number in her head. She never told her husband. She never told the doctors she worked with. She told one person near the end, in 1979, sitting in a chair by a window in an estate house, with a tape recorder running on the table between them. She told her niece. Her name was Edith Vance. She was born in 1902. She was a real nurse in a real county hospital, and she was the one assigned to the locked ward on the nights when the men in suits came. That is who she was, quiet, religious. The kind of woman who folded her hands when she didn't know what to do with them. The kind of woman nobody thinks to ask. That is exactly why they trusted her with it. The patient she measured that winter was too large for the bed. His feet hung off the end by more than a foot. They had pushed two frames together, and it was still not enough. He was dying. He had been dying for weeks. And before he died, Edith Vance took out her tape, and she measured him from heel to crown, and she wrote down what she found. I have spent a long time trying to find out what that number was. I want to show you the file. I want to show you the form. I want to show you the line where the pencil pressed too hard, and then, later, where the eraser took it away and left the paper rough. I can't. The file is gone, the form is gone, the body is gone. The hospital itself was torn down in 1968. Almost everyone who could have told you is dead, but Edith Vance talked, once, to one person, with the tape running, and I have listened to that tape more times than I can count. Before I take you any further, I need you to understand the stakes, because this is not a story about a tall man. Tall men exist, we know that. We have photographs of them, medical records, shoe sizes, death certificates. Pituitary gigantism is real and documented, and nobody is hiding it. That is not what this is. This is about the difference between a record that is kept and a record that is changed. It is about the moment a measurement is taken honestly, and then a man in a good coat walks into a county hospital and tells a nurse to make the number smaller. It is about who gets to decide what the file says after the person inside it is dead. If you have ever wondered why the official story of this country has so many clean edges, so many gaps that line up too neatly, this is one of the seams, and I am going to pull at it. If you want to follow this all the way down with me, subscribe. I am not asking for a favor. I am telling you that the next pieces of this are going to be harder to find and harder to keep online, and the only way you see them is if you are already here when they go up. Stay with me. I found the tape because of an estate. Edith Vance died in 1981, 2 years after the recording. She had no children. What she had was a niece, and the niece kept a box. Inside the box were letters, a Bible, a nurse's cap gone yellow with age, and a cassette in a paper sleeve with a single word written on it in blue ink. The word was Edith. The niece is old now herself. She lives in a house that used to be a working farm, set back from a road that the maps barely remember. There is a long gravel drive, and a porch that sags on the left side, and a dog that does not bark anymore because it is too old to care who comes. She did not want to talk at first. I understand that. People in these hills learned a long time ago that talking is how you lose things. But she let me sit at her table, and she poured coffee that neither of us drank, and after a while she went into another room and came back with the box. She set the cassette on the table. She made me promise not to play it until she was gone, the niece told me, and then she made me promise not to play it for anybody who would laugh. I did not laugh. We listened to it together on a machine the niece had kept just for this, and the voice that came out of the speaker was thin and careful and old. It was the voice of a woman who had decided finally that she was more afraid of dying with the thing inside her than she was of saying it out loud. The niece had recorded the date at the start, February 1979. She had asked her aunt simple questions. Where were you born? What was the work like? And then, near the end of the first side, she asked the question that had been sitting in that family for half a century without ever being said. Aunt Edith, what happened at the hospital? And there is a long pause on the tape. You can hear a clock. You can hear her breathe, and then Edith Vance begins to tell it. I want you to know who she was before I tell you what she saw, because the men who came that night were counting on her being nobody, and she was not nobody. Edith Vance trained as a nurse when nursing was still half servitude. She told her niece about the starched cap she had to keep white as bone, about scrubbing it by hand, about how a smudge on the cap could cost you your shift. She talked about the smell of carbolic soap that never came off her hands. She talked about the lice floors she mopped before she was ever allowed near a patient. She was good at it. She said that plainly, with no pride in it, the way you state a fact about the weather. She did not faint. She did not flinch. She could hold a man down through the worst of it and keep her voice low, and even, and the doctors learned they could put her anywhere, and she would not break. That is why they gave her the night shifts, the long ones, the ones nobody else wanted, in the back of the building where the lights stayed low and the families were not allowed, and that is why, she believed, they gave her the locked ward. She described it for the tape, a short hallway, 2 rooms, a door at the end with a lock that worked from the outside, which she said troubled her, because a lock that keeps a sick man in is not a lock for a sick man's good. There was a window in that end room, painted over. There was 1 chair. The patients who came to the locked ward did not come through the front. They came at night in vehicles she was told not to look at, brought by men she was told not to speak to. She was given a simple instruction: care for them, keep them comfortable, keep your mouth shut. She did. For years she did, and most of what passed through that ward was sad and ordinary. People the county wanted out of sight, people with no family to ask after them. She made her peace with it. She prayed over it. She told her niece she used to ask God to forgive her for the door that locked from the outside, and then she would do her shift anyway, because a job was a job and a paycheck fed her, and the men above her were educated men, doctors and officials, and surely they knew things she did not. She believed that. For most of her life, she believed that the men above her knew better. The winter of 1931 is when she stopped believing it, because that is the winter they brought her the patient who was too large for the bed. She heard him before she saw him. That is how she described it on the tape. She heard the wheels in the hall, and a sound underneath the wheels, a low sound, a man breathing the way a man breathes when each breath is work. And then they brought the gurney through the door, and she understood why they had needed so many men to move it. He was enormous. I am going to be careful here, because this is the part where the temptation is to reach for a number, and I will not give you a number that did not come from her. Everything I tell you about his size, she told her niece, and her niece told me, and the tape backs it up, so I will say it the way she said it. She said his feet hung off the end of the bed by more than a foot, and they had already pushed 2 beds together. She said his hand, when it rested open on the blanket, was wider than the spread of her 2 hands laid side by side. She said his head on the pillow was long, that the jaw was heavy and the brow stood out over the eyes, and that she had never in all her years of nursing seen a skull shaped like it on a living man. She said, when he tried to speak, his voice came from somewhere so deep in his chest that she felt it in the rail of the bed before she heard it. He was sick. Whatever had made him grow had not stopped, and now it was killing him, the way she had heard it could, the heart unable to carry the body it had been forced to build. She nursed him for the better part of 3 weeks. She fed him. She turned him, which took 2 of them. She sat with him at night in that one chair, and she said on the tape in a voice that cracks that he was gentle, that he held her hand once, carefully, the way you would hold something you were afraid to break, and that he thanked her. And then there came a night when she knew he would not last until morning. She did what she had been trained to do. She did what was expected on the death of any patient. She prepared to record him. Final measurements were taken in those days for the record, for the certificate, and Edith Vance had taken them 100 times. She took out her tape. She measured him heel to crown. The number was so far past what she expected that she stopped, and she did it again, slowly, and she got the same number. She wrote it on the intake form in pencil. She also recorded the span of the hand and the length of the jaw, because the form had lines for it, and because she was thorough, and because, she said, some part of her wanted it written down, wanted it true, wanted it kept. She finished. She set down the form. He died a few hours before dawn, and not long after he died, before the sun was even up, 2 automobiles came up the road to the back of the hospital. Men got out, men in suits, in good coats, men she did not know and had never seen, and with them was one man she did know, a man from the county, a man with authority, who would not meet her eyes. They went into the room. They closed the door, and when they came out, the man from the county took the intake form out of her hands, and he read it, and he went very still. Then he handed it back to her, and he told her to change the number. She asked him what number. He pointed to the line, the height. He told her the figure she had written was impossible, that she had made an error, that a tired nurse at the end of a long shift had misread her own tape, and that she would correct it now, in front of them, to a figure that he gave her. She told her niece the figure he gave her was 1.5 feet short of the truth. She said she stood there with the eraser in her hand. She said she looked at the men in the good coats standing by the door, and at the man from the county who would not look at her, and she understood in that moment completely that they were not asking, that there was only one way she walked out of that locked ward with her job and her name and her life the way it had been. So she erased it. She rubbed out the true number until the paper went soft, and over it she wrote the lie they gave her. And the man from the county took the form, and he took the other measurements too, the hand, the jaw, and he tore that part away and put it in his coat. And then they took the body. She told her niece the last thing she remembered from that night was the sound the eraser made. She said, on the tape, I rubbed a man out of the world with a pencil, and I let them carry him off in the dark, and I never told a living soul, because I was afraid. I'm telling you now, he was real. I held his hand. The number I wrote first was the true one. Whatever they say, whatever the paper says now, I changed it. They made me change it. That is the line. That is what she was ordered to erase. The true height of a dying giant, measured by her own hand, written in pencil, and then taken back out of the record because 2 men in good coats decided the country was not allowed to know the size of the man in that bed. Let me bring you back to the form itself, because the form is the whole thing. In 1931, a county hospital intake form was a single sheet. I have seen examples from that era, from that region. There is a header at the top for the institution. There is a block for the patient, name, if known, age, if known, sex, and then a section for the physical filled in by the admitting nurse or the attending. Height, weight, notable conditions. It is mundane. It is the most ordinary document in the world, which is exactly why it is so dangerous when it is true. Because a form like that is not a story. It is not a witness who can be discredited, not a photograph that can be called a fake. not a newspaper that can be dismissed as a tall tale from the hills. It is an administrative record, a number entered in the regular course of business by a trained professional with no reason to lie. In a court, in an archive, in 100 years, that is the kind of paper that gets believed. And that is the kind of paper that Edith Vance said the man from the county would not allow to exist. Think about what he did in order. He did not destroy the form. He could not, fully, because the patient had to be accounted for somehow. So he kept the form and altered the one line that mattered. He changed a true measurement into a plausible one. He left a record that would pass any glance, a tall man, an unusual man, but a man within the bounds of what the world was allowed to believe. And the parts that could not be made plausible, the span of the hand, the length of that heavy jaw, those he did not alter. Those he removed entirely, tore from the sheet, and carried away in his coat. That is not the behavior of men correcting an error. You do not pocket an error. You cross it out, and you move on. You put your initials next to it. What he did was the careful, deliberate editing of a record by someone who knew exactly which lines would survive scrutiny and which had to vanish. Edith Vance hid one thing from them, though. She told her niece this part last, almost as a confession inside the confession. When she erased the height, her hand was shaking, and the eraser tore a small hole in the paper. The man from the county saw it. He took a second form and made her copy the whole record over, clean onto the new sheet, the lie already in place, so that there would be no hole, no shadow of the old number, no evidence the page had ever been touched. But the first form, the torn one, the one with the true number rubbed out and the hole worn through, that one he balled up and threw in the bin by the door. And in the long minutes while they wrapped the body, Edith Vance, who was nobody, who was trusted to be nobody, took the balled up form out of the bin and put it inside her apron. She kept it. For 48 years she kept a torn hospital form with a hole rubbed through the height line. She showed it to her niece that day in 1979. The niece described it to me. A single yellowed sheet, soft and worn through in one spot where a number used to be, the rest of it filled in a careful nurse's hand, and at the bottom, in the section for remarks, one line that the man from the county never saw because Edith added it years later, alone, in pencil. True, taken by me. They made me change it. God forgive me. Where is that form now? I asked. The niece's face changed. She said it had been in the box. She said it had been in the box for years. And she said that sometime after she started telling a few people, quietly, that she had it, the box was gone through. Nothing else was taken. Just the form. I have only her word. I know that. But I will tell you that I believe her, and I will tell you why I believe her by the end of this. The body, you are wondering about the body. So am I. According to Edith Vance, it left the hospital in one of those automobiles before dawn, and it never went to the county morgue, and there was no funeral and no grave that she ever learned of. And when she asked, once, weeks later, a doctor she trusted told her quietly to stop asking. She stopped asking. That too she carried. Now I have to widen this out, because if this were only one nurse and one night, you could call it a strange story and walk away. It is not only one night. The thing Edith Vance described in 1931 fits a pattern that runs back through the whole history of this country, and the pattern is older than she was. For most of the 1800s and into the early 1900s, the discovery of unusually large human remains in the burial mounds of the eastern United States was not fringe. It was news. It was in the county papers and the city papers, and in more than a few cases, in the official records of the institution that was supposed to be the keeper of these things. Consider West Virginia alone, the very state where Edith Vance worked. The Grave Creek Mound at Moundsville is one of the largest conical burial mounds in the country, raised by the people of the Adena culture more than 2,000 years ago, more than 60,000 tons of earth moved by hand. When it was opened in 1838, the excavators recorded burial chambers and remains, and a wealth of artifacts, beads by the thousand, seashells, copper. The mound is real. You can stand at the foot of it today. That much nobody disputes. And in the decades that followed, account after account came out of that same region describing remains that did not fit. In 1875, workers building a bridge near Reevesville were reported to have uncovered 3 skeletons of extraordinary length, with red hair, that a local doctor estimated stood around 8 feet. In the early 1920s, the papers around Moundsville reported a skeleton with a jaw said to be large enough to fit over the face of a grown man. In 1930, a professor from Salem College made the Charleston papers, claiming he had found, in the mounds, the remains of people who stood 7, 8, 9 feet tall. I want to be honest with you about these accounts, because the easy way to do this would be to read them to you and let you assume they are all gospel. And I will not do that. Many of these reports are unverifiable now. Some were surely exaggerated. Newspapers of that era sold copies with wonder, and a tall skeleton sold copies. The official position, settled by the institution's own anthropologists by the 1930s, is that these were misidentifications, deteriorated remains, measured carelessly, ordinary skeletons stretched by careless hands and careless prose, and in some cases outright hoaxes. The Grave Creek stone, the little inscribed disc pulled from that same mound, is now widely regarded as a forgery, its characters traced to a book printed decades before. I am not asking you to throw out the skeptics. I am asking you to notice something about the shape of the explanation. The official answer to every single one of these accounts is the same answer the man from the county gave Edith Vance. You made an error. You misread. A tired person measured wrong. The number is impossible, so the number is wrong, so we will correct it for you. Every time the measurement is too large, the measurement is the thing that gets discarded, and the discarding is always done by the educated man, the authority, the one with the good coat, on behalf of the person who actually held the tape. Edith Vance held the tape. She measured twice. She was not tired, and she was not careless, and she had no story to sell. And she watched a man take her honest number and replace it with a convenient one, and then carry the proof away in his pocket. If it happened once like that, in front of one witness who finally talked, how many of those old errors in the record were corrected the same way, by the same kind of men, with no Edith Vance left alive to tell you? I will not pretend to know. I refuse to tell you these mounds were full of a lost race when I cannot prove it. But I also refuse to accept that every large measurement ever recorded by every careful hand was a mistake, simply because the alternative is inconvenient to the people whose job it is to keep the record clean. Both of those refusals are honest. I am going to hold both. Here is what we can say with more certainty, because it is about the behavior of institutions and not about the bones. When a record is troublesome, institutions do not usually burn it. Burning is crude, and it leaves a hole that someone notices. What institutions do, the careful ones, is reclassify, relocate, and reassign. They move the awkward thing from the open shelf to the closed one. They send the body somewhere it cannot be examined, and they move the people who handled it far enough apart that no two of them can ever sit in a room and compare what they saw. Watch how cleanly that maps onto Edith Vance's night. The record was reclassified. The original form, the troublesome one, was not destroyed. It was edited and rewritten clean, and the true version was meant to go in the bin and disappear, which is exactly what reclassification looks like at the level of a single sheet of paper. A true document made into a false one, then certified as the only one. The body was relocated. It did not go to the county morgue, where a coroner might measure it. It went into an automobile, in the dark, to a destination Edith was warned never to ask about. A body that cannot be examined cannot contradict the form, and the staff were reassigned. Edith Vance told her niece that within a few months of that winter, the doctor who had told her to stop asking was gone, transferred. The orderlies who helped move the body she lost track of. The locked ward took no more patients of that kind that she ever saw. She herself was moved to day shifts on a general floor, away from the back of the building, and she understood it as a reward and a warning at the same time. They were good to her. They were good to her in the specific way that tells you that you have been bought. She was never threatened. That is what she wanted her niece to understand. No one ever laid a hand on her or said an unkind word. It was gentler and worse than that. She was simply made comfortable and made grateful and made aware all at once that the price of the comfort was the silence, and she paid it for 48 years. The genius of it is that no one had to do anything dramatic. The form said what it said. The body was gone, the witnesses were scattered, and the only thing standing between that night and total erasure was an old woman's memory and a torn sheet of paper she was never supposed to have kept. They almost got all of it. They got the body, they got the official form, they got the silence of everyone but her. And in the end, after she finally talked, something got the torn form out of the niece's box too. The only thing left is the tape, and me telling you, and now you. Edith Vance is not the only thread. I want to lay a few others beside hers by name and year and place, not because each one is proven, but because the pattern repeats, and a pattern is a kind of evidence too. Go back to 1838 and the Grave Creek Mound itself in Moundsville, West Virginia. A genuine site, genuinely excavated, genuinely full of remains and treasure, and attached to it, almost immediately, a fog of dispute over what exactly was found and how large it was. A fog so thick that 2 centuries later scholars still cannot agree on the basic facts of the dig. When the very first records of a site are contested and muddled, you should ask who benefited from the muddle. Moved to 1875 near Reevesville, West Virginia. Bridge workers, a routine job, and the reported discovery of 3 remains of great length with red hair, assessed on the spot by a local doctor at around 8 feet. No bones preserved that anyone can produce today. No follow-up by any institution. The remains simply vanish from the story after the first telling. That disappearance is the part that should bother you more than the height. Moved to 1922, Moundsville again, and a newspaper account of a skeleton with a jaw large enough to fit over a grown man's face. The jaw. The same feature Edith Vance described 9 years later on a living man. The same feature the man from the county tore from her form and carried off in his coat. I am not telling you they are connected. I am telling you that the jaw keeps appearing and the jaw keeps disappearing, and the people doing the disappearing keep being the same kind of people. Moved to 1930, Salem, West Virginia. A college professor, a man with a name and a position and a reputation to lose, goes to the papers claiming 7, 8, 9 foot remains from the mounds. He is not an anonymous farmer. He is an educated man making a public claim. And what happens to his claim? It is folded into the great pile of debunked stories, his measurements treated as the careless errors of an amateur, his reputation quietly diminished. The same move again. The man who measured is the man who must have been wrong. And then 1931, the locked ward, Edith Vance, the dying giant, the erased number, the torn form, the automobile in the dark. 4 points across not quite 100 years, all in one corner of one state. Disputed records at the start. Vanishing remains in the middle. Discredited witnesses throughout. And at the end, a confession that names the mechanism out loud. A true measurement, deliberately changed by an official in front of the one person who held the tape. You can dismiss any single one of these. The skeptics have, and on some of them they may be right. but you have to work harder to dismiss the shape they make together, and the shape they make is not the shape of 100 separate honest errors. Errors scatter. They point in every direction. These all point the same way. They all point toward the larger number being the one that gets removed, and the removal being done by the man with the authority on behalf of an institution that would prefer the record stay small. That is not what error looks like. That is what editing looks like. I told you I would refuse twice, and this is the second refusal, because I owe it to you and I owe it to her. I refuse to tell you that I have proven a lost race of giants. I have not. I have one tape, one second-hand description of a torn form that is now missing, and a scatter of old newspaper accounts that responsible people have questioned for good reasons. If you came here wanting me to declare the mounds were full of 9-foot kings, I am going to disappoint you, and I would rather disappoint you than lie to you, because lying to you is the exact thing this whole story is about. But I also refuse the other thing, the easy thing, the thing the institutions would like me to do, which is to take the convenient explanation and call it closed. I refuse to look at Edith Vance, a woman who held a dying man's hand and measured him twice, and kept the proof in her apron for half a century, and confessed it to her own blood with a recorder running, knowing how it would sound, knowing she would be laughed at, gaining nothing 2 years from her own grave, and call her a tired old woman who misremembered. I refuse to do to her in death the exact thing the man from the county did to her in 1931. I refuse to take her number and shrink it because the truth is inconvenient. So I hold both refusals, and I stand in the narrow space between them, and from that space I will tell you what I think is true, which is more modest than either side wants, and harder to dismiss than both. I think some records in this country were changed, not all, not most, but some deliberately by people with the authority to do it, because the true contents were judged too disruptive to leave standing. I think the mechanism Edith Vance described, alter the line that can pass, remove the line that cannot, relocate the body, scatter the staff, is real, because it is too specific and too practiced to be invented by a religious old woman who had no other lies in her. And I think that mechanism has been used more than once, and that we will never know how many times, because the whole point of the mechanism is that it leaves nothing to count. And here is why this is not just history, why it should sit in your chest right now and not stay safely 100 years away. The same move is still available. It is easier now, not harder. A record today is not a sheet of paper in an apron pocket. It is a database entry that can be changed with no eraser, no hole, no shadow, no torn corner for a nurse to smuggle out. There is no balled up first version in the bin. There is only the current version, and the current version is the only version there has ever been, as far as the system is concerned. If a number is inconvenient today, it does not have to be carried off in a coat. It just has to be overwritten, and no one will ever feel the paper go rough under their thumb. Edith Vance only beat them because the technology of 1931 left a physical scrap behind, and because she was brave enough once, at the very end, to keep it and to talk. Both of those things are getting rarer. The scraps are vanishing into systems that keep no scraps. And the bravery, the willingness to say the inconvenient true thing into a recorder, knowing you will be mocked, that has always been rare, and it is not getting more common. That is the present day stake, not whether giants walked here. Whether you would even be able to tell now if a number you were given had been quietly made smaller, and whether anyone left in the room would have the nerve to keep the torn page. So let me end where I should, which is with her. Edith Vance was not a hoaxer. She did not sell a single thing. She did not write a book, or go to a paper, or charge admission to see a skeleton. She did the opposite. She buried the truth for 48 years out of fear and shame, and the only profit she ever took from it was the comfort of a day shift and the quiet of a clear floor, and she hated herself for taking it. When she finally spoke, she gained nothing and risked the only thing she had left, which was the way her own family would remember her. She did it anyway. She did it because she could not carry the number into the ground, and because she had decided that one true telling, even to a single niece, even onto a single cassette, was worth more than the safety she had bought with silence. I believe her, not because I can prove the number, I cannot. I believe her because of the shape of what she did, which is the exact opposite shape of a lie. Liars add, they embellish, they expand, they reach for the camera. Edith Vance subtracted her whole life down to one room, one chair, one dying man whose hand she held, one number she wrote and was forced to erase, and one torn page she could not make herself throw away. That is not the behavior of someone building a story. That is the behavior of someone trying to set down a weight before they die. They took the body. They took the official form. They scattered the witnesses and they bought the silence, and in the end, something even reached into a niece's box and took the torn page she had kept. They got nearly all of it. They did not get the tape. They did not get her voice saying, thin and cracked and unmistakably true, "He was real. I held his hand. They made me change it." They did not get this. They did not get you, listening now, knowing. The archive was never destroyed. It was only buried. That is the thing I keep coming back to every time I think this story is finished and find that it is not. They almost never destroy it. Destruction leaves a crater. They bury it instead. One altered line, one relocated body, one reassigned nurse at a time, until the surface looks smooth and undisturbed, and you would never know that anything was ever put down underneath it. But buried is not gone. Buried means it is still there. Buried means that someone, someday, with enough patience and enough nerve, can dig. Edith Vance dug once at the very end with nothing but her own voice. The least I can do is keep digging in the daylight where it is harder to bury me. And there is more underneath. There is always more. Because money buries the same way bones do. The next thing I want to put in front of you is not a hospital and not a mound. It is a family. One of the richest names this country has ever produced. A name you have heard your entire life. A name attached to railroads and mansions, and a fortune so large it shaped cities. And there is a problem with that name, a problem in the oldest records, a hole rubbed through the height line, you might say, in the financial story instead of the medical one. There is no recorded dollar attached to the Vanderbilts before 1850. None that holds up. A fortune that supposedly built itself in plain sight, and yet the beginning of it, the first true number, is missing the same way Edith Vance's number is missing. Edited, relocated, made plausible, buried. I have been digging into where that money actually started, and what the earliest records say before the official story was written over them. That is the next one. Subscribe so you are here when it goes up. The archive was never destroyed. It was only buried.